Hello and welcome to The View from the Top. I'm Brian Friedman and I'm with
Michelle Durkin. Hey, Brian.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
Cool, really good. Looking forward to a great show. We've got a great guest and we've got, it's just going to be a fabulous show we've got lined up.
For sure.
And you're back at home in New Jersey, I take it?
I'm home in New Jersey. Yep, we are starting to lock down again here in New Jersey. So sticking close to home.
Yeah, oh dear. It's hopefully vaccines and we'll be through it before we know it. Anyway, there's my fingers crossed, hoping. Anyway, out there in LinkedIn world, I think you all know how it works. But if you're new to the game, do tell us if you're here. Just write in the LinkedIn comments box. Just say who you are, where you're from, what the weather's like where you are. Just say hi to the guests when you see them. But just join the conversation. We always like to know, who we've got joining us live, and we will try and answer your questions as they arise. It's a very interactive format.
Yep, we've got Amsterdam, Houston, France, Connecticut, Philadelphia, Michigan, also lockdown in Michigan. So of course, lockdown in London. So I think a lot of people are feeling the same effects.
Absolutely. There's a lot of lockdown out there. And I can see we've already got, what have we got? About 70 people already come on board. People are coming in. So let me just tell you a little bit of news. I mean, the first thing is we're delighted to say that we are certified by ERC for credit. So we're certified for both GMS and CRP credits. And we will be giving you the credit number at the end of the show. That's an ERC rule that we don't give you the number until the end to make sure you stay and watch us. Of course, they would anyway, wouldn't they? But the big news is that we're also now certified for SHRM credits, and that's courtesy of our good friends at Quicken Loans who are organising that. So shout out to Lisa Fontana for organising that. We really appreciate it. So we're now pre-authorised for SHRM credits, and also we will be getting HRCI credits. We're going through the pending process at the moment, but fingers crossed we've got those coming. So wherever you want your credits, we can offer them, which is great.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I mean it is for people who need those certification credits. Then this is the place to come. So we're getting people from all over the place. And if you're out there, hit that like button, hit the applause button, give us a heart. It just helps us to know who's there, and seeing some of these names coming up. So that's great. Great to see you all there. Let me tell you about our guest today. I'm delighted to say that our guest is a man called Hugo Scheckter from West Ham United Football Club. Now, I appreciate that we are global. I appreciate that many of you who are listening in today are in the football world, but I also appreciate that many of you who are listening do not follow football, or indeed soccer, and are from all over the world. Don't worry, you don't have to know football or soccer to understand the issues, but you are going to find it fascinating today, because the one thing we all have in common is that we all look after managing people from one location to another. The difference is the people that Hugo moves are very different to the people that our traditional mobility managers move. The people that Hugo moves are typically very young, in their early 20s quite often. They may not speak the language of the place they're going to. They will be hugely talented, hugely well paid, but sometimes maybe a little innocent in the ways of the world. It may be their first time moving country. They may be moving without family support. And also, unlike many typical expats or assignees, these guys are very much in the media spotlight when they arrive. And they have to perform immediately. There is immense pressure to literally hit the ground running. So very different to traditional assignees. And we're going to get into that whole discussion. And I think that's going to be pretty fascinating.
I agree.
So, Michelle, I'm guessing you're not a big football fan, soccer, or
I not I'm an American football fan. I'll say that. Yeah. But I do like sports, and I'm really excited just to hear about this conversation, just from a different level. This is different perspective than we're used to hearing about, but at the same time, the same. So definitely looking forward to this one. And
let's talk about what we've got coming up next week. Do you just want to tell us about next week's session?
Next week, yes, we've got Alf Karlestader. Alf, I hope I pronounced your name right. Alf has worked on both sides of mobility, both in-house and on the service provider side. Alf started his career with Crown and then spent some time at Goldman Sachs and GE. He's worked in Korea and Australia and has spent the last 20 years in Singapore. And now Alf is actually part of the Benevo Strategy Council. So we're happy to welcome Alf to the Benevo Strategy Council, and he will be on next week's show.
Excellent. And we've also got a Benevo Bites session tomorrow, and that's a roundtable with the Benevo Strategy Council. And we're going to be talking about all the things that have happened during the year, all the exciting developments like the partner platform and all the other things that have been rolled out. Looking forward to what's coming out in 2021. And we've got a number of really leading mobility professionals on the Benevo Strategy Council. That includes Wes Okamura, Michael Piker, Alf, you, Michelle, Nitsan Yudan, and me. So if you're interested in finding out about some of the latest developments in technology, then we're back tomorrow. The other thing I wanted to do, of course, was to talk about the top 100, and we're getting close to that now. We're actually only 2 weeks away from the big reveal, but I'll just run the quick promo video so people can get a feel for it. So as you can see, we've also got a load of partner organizations now, and that's really important to us to make this a truly global initiative from around the industry. So thank you to all our partners. And as I said, we've had 1,800 nominations, and the big reveal is coming out on the 2nd. So whatever you do, make sure you've got that date in your diary for the big reveal of who are the top 100. Anyway, it's time to bring our guests on board. So shall we just say hello to our guests? Let's bring on, we'll take Julia first.
Hi.
Hi, Julia.
Hi.
Hi, Julia.
Good, you've had a good week?
Very good. Yeah, very busy.
Excellent. And Pat, we've
Hello.
got you, Pat.
Well, you have me back.
Yeah, a little secret to our audience. We've actually had, Pat's been having a few technical problems and had to switch laptop about a minute before we went live on air. But
yeah,
so
my laptop crashed
yeah.
twice in the space of 15 minutes. So fortunately, I have a backup.
Good man, good man. And of course, the star of the show, Hugo. Good to see you.
Hi guys, you're right.
And where are you today?
I'm currently in London on a day off, so but I thought I'd get changed into my gear just so people recognise where I'm working. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, and you're with West Ham, obviously known as the Hammers, and you've got the Hammers as your logo there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So big shout out to if there's any West Ham fans out there, then please, now's the time. And of course, I know, Hugo, you're also a legend at Southampton. So if there's any Southampton fans out there as well, a big shout out for Hugo and do that. I'm sure all the questions are going to come in as we go through. So that's exciting. It is. What we are going to do though is we always try and have a little fun fact of the week. So I thought I always try and do an expat related fun fact, and I try and relate it to the subject. So I've looked at some fun facts about expats in football. So I'm going to test you a bit here, Hugo. So let's see where we get to. Okay, I've just done a bit of research. There's a study done a while ago of 147 leagues in 98 countries, and into the expats there. And what the study found was that 21% of all players across those leagues were expats. And by expats, they didn't mean people who just claimed a nationality because they had a grandparent, but people who had actually moved to play. In the UEFA countries, 26% of all players are expats. So a huge percentage of the population. Now, here's the question for you, Hugo. Which country do you think is the biggest exporting nation of football talent? Has the most footballers playing overseas?
I would probably think like either France, Spain, or Italy, but I'm sure you're going to make me pick one.
I'm going to make you pick none of those, I'm afraid.
No.
No, I'm sorry. The answer is Brazil. Brazil has 1,330 expats, or at least it did when this survey was done, which was about 18 months ago. 1,330 expats playing overseas, followed by France and Argentina. So Brazil is the number one exporter of football talent. But it gets more interesting. Well, it depends on interesting, doesn't it? But if you take it as a percentage of the population, which country has got the highest proportion of its population playing in football overseas? I'm not going to make you do this. You won't guess it.
A small country like Malta or something like that.
Close. Iceland.
Okay.
Has got one professional footballer overseas for every 5,000 of its population, which is just extraordinary. In terms of the most popular travel corridor, and I suppose this one's quite obvious, it's Brazil to Portugal. That's where, because of the language. And the next one is Argentina to Chile. The biggest importers of footballers, who do you think is the biggest importing nation of footballers?
I would say that England is an obvious answer, but I'm guessing that's not.
Absolutely. Even if you ignore the Scottish, which obviously are treated as a separate nation for football, ignoring that, England is the biggest importer, followed by Italy and the USA. The other thing that's interesting, just to finish up on expats and footballers, is they've also done studies about what happens between a national team and exporting players. And what it's discovered is that the better a national team does, the more they then end up sending players overseas, what they're calling the shop window effect. If the national team does well, more of the players end up in the next couple of years playing overseas. Then if you leave it a few years after that, the more players you've got playing overseas, the better your national team does. They call that the blending effect. So interesting, well, I thought it was interesting research into football.
It's easy to get visas. The visas are based on the number of times you've played for your national team and at what level that national team is. So the higher ranked a team is, the less caps they've had to have had before they qualify for a visa. So that definitely makes sense what you've just said.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to say goodbye to you, Hugo. You will be back, don't worry, and we're going to go into Julia's immigration update. So we'll just move on. We'll go on to talk about immigration, then we're going to talk about tax, and then we're going to come back to talk all about football. Okay? Julia.
Hi.
Magic, you've appeared. So where are you going to take us on your roundup today?
So today, just a few words about Brexit and frontier workers, and then talking about the Singapore tech visa. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Charlotte Wills, who's given me a lot of information about the frontier workers. But just starting with sponsor licenses, you know, we've heard the sort of hopeful news from David Frost that, you know, we will be signing some sort of agreement with the EU before the end of December. And hopefully that's going to be...
Is that definite?
No, not definite, but, you know, hopeful.
Fingers crossed, absolutely.
Yes. So I think that the really important thing to say is that a lot of small employers who are only employing EU citizens will never before have had to get a sponsor license. And those employers, when the end of the year passes and they start in January, they will have to make an application for a sponsor license if they want to employ new people from the EU. And the good thing is that the Home Office have now got a premium processing process in place. It's £500, but the whole thing can be done in 10 working days. And currently, you know, it can take up to 8 weeks. So that's a brilliant step forward. So this is only for the EU citizens that are coming into the UK and are living here after January. The ones that are here already before, you can apply under the EU settlement scheme. And we're seeing those applications come through really fast. In fact, you know, we're seeing some come through in 48 hours. But there's 3 areas of concern, and I just wanted to highlight those to you. The first is that many employers thought that they would bring their people to the UK before the end of the year, and that way they could apply under the EU settlement scheme. And unfortunately, because of COVID, they can't bring them in. So that is an issue. That is an issue. And what we keep telling employers is the best thing to do is see what happens week by week and still plan, if possible, to bring them in before the end of the year. And what happens is, if they come in after the end of this year, when the new rules apply, there is a concession for employers for 6 months. They can just rely on the fact that they have an EU passport, and they can just rely on that and they can get them working. But within that 6 months period, by the end of June, they will have to apply for a longer term proper immigration permission for them, in which case they will need this sponsor license. The other thing I was going to say is the other area of concern is the short-term travel options for Europeans coming to the UK. They have to stick, after the end of this year, they have to stick very closely to the business visitor guidance, or they have to apply under the new immigration scheme. And remember, that's if they're intercompany transferees, then the level is sort of degree level and a salary of around 41,000, or they can apply under the skilled worker route where the salary is slightly lower, but then they have the English language test. So I'm just raising it out there as at a very high level to say that in the summary of this is that if you have people that you know you want to work for your company from January of next year, you know, definitely, then you need to try and bring them in and apply under the EU settlement scheme. For those companies that don't already have a sponsor license, they must start to think about that absolutely now for new people coming in after January. And for new people coming in after January who don't meet the business visitor rules, they have to look at the new scheme. Now, the other thing is that the Home Office have issued a frontier workers scheme, which is live from the 10th of December. And this is a frontier worker is an EU citizen who commutes to the UK for work. And there is no policy guidance from the Home Office. And this scheme, this new scheme for frontier workers, is similar to the EU settlement scheme. It's an online scheme, and you have to make an application before the end of June next year, like the EU settlement scheme. And at this current time, we're a little bit confused as to, you know, the difference between the frontier worker scheme and the EU settlement scheme, and it will be interesting to see what the policy is. So at the moment, you know, probably the best advice is to hold off. Well, you can't apply until the 10th of December, but hold off deciding what to do until you see that guidance. The guidance is going to be very important. And then just a bit.
And then I think we're going to move on to Singapore, aren't we? Is that?
Yes, and then just the last word about Singapore is that they've announced a new tech visa, and I think we're going to see this all over the world. It's for 500 places initially, but it is, the bar's set quite high. So these are actually very senior people, or people who have got a lot of experience, and I won't go into that now. But I think it's, there's a slight disappointment with the scheme that it's set so high, and there's not very clear about how you renew it. But I think the idea of a tech visa to attract tech talent is an interesting one, and I think it's part of a trend like we see remote working schemes.
Okay, well, we've got Alf on the show next week from Singapore, so maybe we'll pick up a bit more. Now, what I'd like to do, of course, is to bring on to move from immigration to tax. So it's time for tax with Expat Pat. Pat, I hope you love the video.
I do. Of course, seeing those tax forms reminds me it's time for tax season once again. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Or tax season with a difference this year. Everything done remotely.
That's right. And just as a small comment for the audience, now's the time to do some tax planning before the end of the year. So be thinking about what you need to do to plan for any unexpected tax bills. Yep.
On that happy Thanksgiving thought.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what are you going to talk to us about today, Pat?
I've got a couple of tax stories that I wanted to share with everyone today. First is the jock tax in honor of our guest today. And this is the taxes that professional athletes have to pay. And really, there's a few wrinkles to that compared to the normal expatriate employee. The key one is that professional athletes are compensated very highly. And so how are they taxed is the question. First and foremost, athletes will be taxed based on their residency. So tax planning in that space is looking to establish residency in a country that's got a very low or a lower tax structure. And then second, they're taxed based on where their services are performed. Just like a regular employee, you do some sort of a allocation of the compensation to determine the sourcing of the compensation. There are two allocation methods that are typically used for athletes. One is where are the games played, and second is where duty days are. Duty days being defined as during the season, what games are they playing, what practices are they doing, what travel are they doing. And so, for your typical league that has teams in a bunch of different jurisdictions, they will trigger tax on a non-resident basis in each of those locations. So this impacts athletes here in the United States, across different states, based on where the games are being played. Also in a cross-border arrangement, especially in Europe, where the leagues, you'd have that same situation. And of course you ask, well, gee, isn't there a tax treaty provision that allows them to be exempt from that based on the magical 183-day rule? And the answer to that is generally no. The entertainers and professional athletes have a special article within most of the tax treaties which explicitly says you can't take advantage of the 183-day rule. So, really the tax authorities recognize that these athletes are compensated well, and therefore they want a piece of that tax pie to do that. So
the message there is really take professional advice if you're looking at, because athletes are not like the rest of us. And I think and also I think you're going to talk about remote workers as well. Is that right?
Yeah, but let me finish my thought on that. There has been some COVID impact to this jock tax. So here in the United States, the National Basketball Association players, they had to suspend their season back in March. When they resumed, they decided to go into the bubble in Orlando, which is based in Florida. So those games that were played in Orlando did not attract any state tax. And so that is something that will be an impact as we go forward, either with suspended seasons or trying to apply some sort of a bubble concept to that. So on the next story that I wanted to cover, I wanted to talk about a research paper that was released by Deutsche Bank recently. And they were looking at economic kind of thinking out of the box. What can we do to get out of this pandemic? What do we must do to rebuild? And they had a bunch of different proposals. The one that caught our eye and actually did make the press was a proposed special tax on remote workers. The premise is that employees that work from home receive immediate financial benefits. They don't have commuting costs. They don't have to spend for business clothing and the like. And that's not available to employees that cannot work remotely, that have to go, mostly impacting service industries, healthcare, and the like. And the proposal that Deutsche Bank had suggested is that remote workers should pay a special tax. And they had suggested a 5% tax rate. And that would be earmarked to provide financial assistance to those folks who don't have that luxury of being able to work from home, assuming higher health risks because they're doing that. There would be some exemptions based on this proposal. Lower income remote workers would be exempt, self-employed would be exempt. And if the government declares a lockdown, then the remote worker tax would not be applicable. I think what they're trying to do is, once we get past the pandemic and people continue to work remotely, how do we go about addressing this? So it's an interesting concept. We've talked about it here at Air Inc. a bit. And is it really true that remote workers are saving money because you have higher utility costs at home? You may have decided that you can't live with roommates. You need to move to a one-bedroom apartment, say. And so that actually is an increased cost. So it'll be interesting to see if any of the tax writers take up on this concept. But it'd be interesting to hear what folks on the audience have to say about that as well.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's definitely something we'll be picking up on, I think, in the new year. But that's absolutely fascinating. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring on our special guest. So let's bring on Hugo. But thank you so much, Pat, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time, which will be for the big reveal show. So you'll be with us then.
That's right. Looking forward to that.
Amazing. It's only 2 weeks' time. So anyway, here he is. Our So we've got our special guest, Hugo. Great to see you. Even though you're a hammer, great to see you. We won't bring any of the rivalry into it. All I know is my team conceded 3 very painful goals to you guys a few weeks back,
including one excellent last-minute goal of the month winner.
That's the word I was looking for, but I remember it well. Anyway, great to see you, Hugo. And out in the audience, please, put those likes and the hearts and the claps. And if you've got any questions, fire them ahead to Hugo, and we'll try and take your questions live on air. And I or Michelle will pull those questions on screen so that we can discuss them. But let's just start at the beginning, Hugo. I mean, you're head of player care at West Ham. What is player care? I mean, just because it's not a term that a lot of the audience will be familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, even within football, player care isn't really a set definition or a set term. I mean, we look after everything from the sort of global mobility that a lot of people on here do, which is, signing an athlete, moving them to London, getting them settled in, but also that ongoing support as well. So we're in charge of, I do a 24-hour emergency response service for our athletes. My department manages player appearances, commercial activities, team logistics, team travel, team communications as well internally. So a number of different sort of facets, and I think some clubs will do more than I do, and some clubs will do less than I do, and or split those into different roles. But the idea of player care is try and remove the stress from the athletes so that they can just focus on the football. So by really focusing on anything that's not football or medical, we kind of try and take all of that stress away from them. So, we're getting the most out of them as a club, and they're getting the most out of themselves as people as well.
And how did you get into it? I mean, did you wake up one day and say, I want to go into player care? Or, I mean, how did you get into the game?
Yeah, so I was coaching when I was like 16, 17, coaching football in England. And then I went to university out in America in Washington, DC, did some more coaching, and also did some administration, and really found out that I was going to be an average coach, but probably could be a decent administrator. I was kind of pushed towards doing the sort of behind the scenes route, but actually I wanted to do support services. I thought that's where my niche would be, and I was convinced otherwise that I'd probably be better off in the sort of team side. And my first job was a club in Indianapolis, so in Indiana in America, and I lived there for a year, and that was tough. And I think doing that and living in a country, I'd been in DC for 4 years, but moving to a state where I didn't know anyone and was kind of new, that I got to see from the athlete side how difficult that can be. And eventually went to Southampton, was there for 3.5 years, and then joined West Ham in May 2018, where, I've got another month or so until I depart West Ham.
Okay, on the path just new. But so tell me, who is the typical sort of person that you move?
So, I mean, obviously a professional footballer, or a coach, or some sort of highly skilled person in their field. I think the youngest we've had is 17. The oldest I've had probably 32, 33, something like that. They tend to, we get people from all around the world. I've worked with sort of a Japanese player, South Americans, a lot of Europeans, obviously, but even players from other clubs in the UK. So, we recently signed a lad on loan from Watford, and Watford's about 45 minutes away, but still there's a whole process that we go through, and we just try and tailor it to that person. But I think that the biggest thing for us is that we sometimes get, hours notice rather than days or weeks or months notice. It's in 2 hours, this person will be arriving at the airport, get ready to move them in. So it really is very different. A lot of the guys are, I would say, not say uneducated, but don't have a lot of formal education. And potentially have never even heard of where they're coming to in terms of, London, I guess, yes, but in terms of Essex, or they don't really know the area around where we are. So, it's certainly, I think, quite different to a lot of what your members would experience.
I've got to put this comment up here. Hang on.
Yeah.
What would you like to work with an amazing athlete like Wilshire?
That's actually Jack. It might well be Jack, but Jack's a lovely person, and we miss him every day at West Ham.
Okay, and other comments coming in. Another George Washington University alum. So you're all over the world in your fan club here, Hugo. And here's a question. What, in your opinion, differentiate the player profile from the more traditional expat?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing to think about is that these guys are in the public eye straight away. I mean, there is a 24-hour news show here dedicated to who's moving to which club. And so from the word go, they are expected to perform not only on the pitch, but everyone's watching them, and you've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people making a judgment on you. The first time you walk onto the pitch, the first time they see a picture of you, and so it's really, really interesting to see how the pressure that they're really under from straight away. So I think that's probably the biggest difference that I would see, is that just the level of public interest and pressure that is on their shoulders as soon as they start.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting players coming in from all over the world. Talent knows no borders, no boundaries. And I mean, here's a question. Do you provide intercultural training for footballers traveling to new countries? I mean, when people come in, do you tell them what to expect of UK culture and what might be different from their culture, or indeed to help them understand each other's cultures in the squad?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more informal. It's not as such a course or a lesson, but we will, the biggest problem a lot of them find is driving, where they're driving on the other side of the road, and a lot of them have got licenses but don't know what a zebra crossing is, and so we have that panic moment where they go flying through a zebra crossing on the King's Road and then have to educate them. But a lot of it is just kind of trying to understand the athletes as quickly as possible, because as I said, we don't have that 2 months, 3 months, 2 years, whatever it is, time to get them. They're coming on a plane in 2 hours time, so we try and help them while they're there. We give them this resource pack, which is 40 pages of information and translated into their language. But it's difficult to say, right, you're going to be moving to London in 2 years' time. It's really not like that. It is, you'll be moving there in 2 hours' time. So the ongoing training, and we had a great example where we had a Brazilian player who was learning English, and his English teacher was from the East End of London, so sort of the Cockney accent that a lot of our fans are from. And he texted me, "All right, pal," and it was just such a I was like, where's he learned that from? And it turns out he'd been trying to learn relevant phrases based on the fan base, rather than just learning out of Duolingo or a textbook. And again, the English lessons we do are trying to be football specific, because really the most important thing for our guys is to be able to hit the ground running on the football pitch. And then they don't need to order a lemonade in a cafe as much as they need to know what man on is, or he's behind you, or pass it, or that's more important. So it's again just trying to.
So do you have a phrase book you give them of sort of things like man on?
Well, we work with the language trainers, the language providers to do that. So yeah, there is a set sort of book of phrases that we work with. But but everyone's different. Some people are very, they want to learn everything about the country, and some people don't. People just want to come here, play their football and leave. So, it's really, we try and tailor everything so specifically by learning what they like as soon as possible. That, it's not one size fits all for sure.
Okay, we're getting quite a few technical questions coming through. I'll just raise some. Here's one. Do you pay net after tax, or do people get?
So they do PAYE, so they're paid as any other employee. So the tax is deducted, as they're paid, and so but their contracts are in gross, same as anyone else's.
Okay, and here's another question that comes through. What are the hardest integration issues with the families? Is it the spouses? I presume it's also other relations that might be there, or.
It's difficult because sometimes if you have two players of the same position, their husbands, if it's talking about the spouses, their husbands are rivals, and if you're a goalkeeper, only one can play, so you don't have multiple goalkeepers playing in the same time. So it's difficult sometimes. Is there that positional rivalry? Is that well, if your husband gets a new contract, mine not? At Southampton, we had a really, really good wives group, and we kind of had a little wives committee. At West Ham, we're still building that, so we've got a wives or WhatsApp group, which wives and girlfriends and partners, to be open to everyone. But yeah, we have a WhatsApp group where they talk to each other and they help that. But we try and do little events. We did a dinner back in, it feels a long time ago, January now, where we had all the players and the staff, so including myself and my level of staff and their partners, and we did a nice dinner where everyone got to get know each other there. So it really, you try and put things on. Some people just aren't interested, so you try and find that person that'll be relevant to them, and often it's sort of nationality cliques or language cliques, and so often the sort of Spanish speaking players and the Spanish speaking partners will kind of gravitate towards each other naturally. So yeah.
You've got a fan base out there. Here's from Lisa. Hugo's really leading the way in athlete care. Much to learn and continue to do in this area. Keep up the great work. And
that's my professor from university. So thanks, Lisa.
There you go. There you go. And so we're talking about, or actually, here's a question I'm just going to add on. What is your most memorable player care situation and why? So
I think the story I tend to like is my first year in player care, I got asked for, one of the players said, I need a pink and champagne Christmas tree. And this was like 2 days before Christmas. And I'm like, what? Where am I going to get this from? So anyway, I did all this research and, trying to find this pink and champagne Christmas tree. Anyway, I got it delivered and he goes to me, what the hell is this? And I'm like, it's a pink Christmas tree with champagne colored things. And he's like, why would I want a pink Christmas tree? I want the decorations to be pink and champagne colored. And so I'd had this horrible 6 foot high fluorescent pink Christmas tree. And he was like, oh, I'll just have to have it now. And so I said, next time needs to be more clear with what he asked for. But it's that kind of silly thing where actually, that sounds like a bit of a joke, but actually, if the most important thing in his life is to get that Christmas tree up for his family, then that's a priority. And it might sound meaningless, but actually, I try and look at it from the other side. Is if I moved to say Senegal, where we had a young player from Senegal when I was at Southampton, would I know where to buy a Christmas tree? Would I know where to, how to get a phone, how to get a car? And I think a lot of the time our guys get criticised because you think, oh, they get paid all that money. Well, why don't they do this themselves? And actually, we're paying them a lot of money, so they should be able to focus on the football because we need them to hit the ground running rather than running around trying to work things out for themselves. So, those that want to learn, we're absolutely happy to teach them, but most of them, we just need to help them as quickly as possible.
Someone asked the question here, Nelly asked it, do you pay them a cost of living adjustment? I mean, with a week, because in the mobility world, when you move people to a high cost location, you tend to give them an allowance, but presumably you just pay people coming in our words, permanent transfers, you just pay people what is the market salary that you need to get them on board.
Yeah, I don't think any of our players would be struggling for, to make ends meet in London, despite the high cost of rentals. But no, some of the players will negotiate a relocation amount or a temporary living allowance or something like that. But no, their contract wouldn't change based on the cost of living. It would be more a new renegotiation based on playing ability or transfer, market value, something like that. But no, we wouldn't change it based on cost of living.
And what about the secrecy aspects of this? When, our typical viewers are moving somebody, they might organise for them to do a look-see visit of where they're going. But I'm guessing that in your case, when people are coming over, the last thing you want is anybody to know that they're coming over because you don't want the deal to be stolen by somebody else. And also you don't want the media all over them. And even dealing with your suppliers, I suspect there'll be people in the back office that could possibly leak stuff to the press. So, how do you maintain secrecy when you're bringing somebody over?
Yeah, like a more practical example is I've always got a change of plain clothes in my car because I wear, we all wear the tracksuit every day. So I've always got a change of clothes in case I need to sort of be, incognito, I guess. But, you're too famous
incognito, Hugo. Certainly now.
I really don't. No.
They're going to say, it won't just be Southampton will be worshipping you.
No. I think, the transfer process when we're signing someone is really normally like a private plane to the hospital, to the hotel, and then to the stadium or the training ground to sign a contract. And that's when it's secret. And to be honest, the private terminal is so used to having, celebrities in there that they don't worry about it. The hotel, we have good long-standing relationships, so they go in the loading bay. We manage it pretty well, to be honest. So if it leaks, it's not from someone seeing that person. It's normally through some other means. So
yeah. And another question that's come up is, I'll just ask this one about security. How do you coordinate security and protection whilst the athlete is expatriating?
So we'll have it depends on the profile of the player, really. We'll make a judgment based on that. But we have our own security team, both in-house and then sort of the team security who just travel for games. And if needed, we'll hire them in and bring them around. But especially in COVID times, it's actually been a lot easier for us because there's no fans around. There's no one's out and about. So actually, it's been a lot easier for us, especially in terms of team travel. But actually what we find is actually having security normally draws attention to people more than, going on, because a lot of people are used to seeing these guys in their training kit or their match kit, and sometimes they're not that recognizable just in their plain clothes, unless you're a big football fan. So majority of the times we wouldn't have security unless it was a massive name signing, and then we would make that provision. But yeah, just having things well organized means you're not out in the public for very long at all. So yeah, we've not had any issues so far.
Okay, and another point I'd just like to make is just pull that one up, is bubbles. Now obviously anybody who's a soccer fan and knows West Ham will know the reference that I'm putting in there about blowing bubbles. But we've got different sorts of bubbles these days. We've got the isolation bubbles, and because most of the people out there listening to this are working from home. Professional footballers cannot work from home by definition, or that would be a bit of a rubbish match if they all were on their on their FIFA or something playing from home. But in all seriousness, how are you ensuring that you don't, excuse the pun, blow your bubble, blow your travel bubble, your isolation bubble?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy because, we've been back at work fully since, I think, April, early May. And that's, most of the staff at the training ground, we went down to essential staff, and then we've kind of tried to ramp it back up to try and, because, then we're competing with other teams. And when we came back in the end of last season, we had 9 games left, and we were, I think, 1 point clear of the relegation zone, which is, for those who don't know, it's the bottom 3 teams in the Premier League get taken out of the Premier League at the end of the season. And so we couldn't really afford to not have the key people around that they needed. So we get tested weekly by a private company that the Premier League pays for. And it's difficult because you've got players who have got spouses or kids at home who are going to school. You've got, most of the spouses don't tend to work just because of the financial situation. But even it sounds, and this is sort of a first world problem, I think, that some people won't have much appreciation for, but these guys are based on their image, and so not being able to get a haircut and for 4 months when they're live on TV and ultra HD and that's the way they make money is through their image. I think that was tough, and we even discussed having a barber on the testing list just to try and remove that issue. But it is difficult right now. We're in an international break, which means players go, all the way around the world to their countries. So, we have players currently in South America, and we've had, Eastern Europe, Africa, none in North America. But, that's really difficult for us because they're not traveling. They're traveling commercially, most of them. They're joining up with countries that maybe don't have the same protocols that we do. And we're seeing on the news, number of international squads being ravaged by positive tests. And so you're just there, sat there hoping right now that, guys haven't been caught up in that. And, even right now, we've got all the players coming in, the next day or two, meeting them at the airport, trying to get them tested, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of spinning plates. And I would say that this has become something that I never would have thought I was doing a year ago, but I have to manage all the testing operations for the club, and it's one of those things you have to keep thinking, oh, there's that eventuality, and this person does this, and yeah, it's been a lot of work for sure.
And have you seen a lot of cases, or has it all been fairly okay?
Publicly, we had the manager and 2 players tested positive just before a match a couple of months ago now, and touch wood, we haven't had a lot more. But that was difficult because it was the warm up of a game, and the manager suddenly you got to go, and he's like, well, I've got a game, and you're like, no, you've got to go. So that's unsettling for everyone really. And 2 players who are in the starting lineup got pulled out, and we work with the leagues now to try and make sure that doesn't happen again, because it's terrible for our preparation. But it's not easy, and you're out. Whether you can test negative again, you're still out for the government mandated isolation period. So that can be really frustrating. The track and trace as well is difficult for us because again, it's probably not designed for people who are tested every week in a bubble, but legally we will still comply with it. So there's so many sort of hoops to jump through and issues that we face. But at the end of the day, we want to keep playing because it gives something to people to watch at home, and a lot of people care obviously massively about football, and we want to keep going. And as of yet, no one's been seriously ill with this, in the football world, which is a huge relief.
I want to move on to another subject, again, actually from your friend Lisa. She said, we're seeing more discussion around mental health, but there seems to be some possible negative consequences for those who share. Have you seen this happen? Is this a concern? And I suppose looking at it from my perspective, as a fan's perspective, you've got obviously a lot of alpha male players, not all of whom are going to get in the team every week. So there's going to be a lot of frustration building up when they don't get in the team or when something goes wrong. You've got people who are injured who maybe are getting increasingly frustrated because they can't get to play. And all sorts of, let alone any family tensions that might be going on in the background or other cliquey tensions that may happen. How do you manage that? And to take the point that Lisa says, when there are issues and people have shared, and I can think of some players who very famously have shared, how do you manage that to make it not not being negative, the very fact that people are sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that I don't know that any sport has really got it right 100%, and I wouldn't say that football's got it right either. I think there's a greater understanding, especially in the last couple of years, and one thing we're looking at is you're not either well or not well, with mental health. You can be, and it would talk about a flourishing scale, which is as you want to be flourishing, but actually you might be a little bit below that, and you still want to get work to push yourself towards flourishing rather than letting it get to a bad state before you act. We have psychologists. We have a full-time psychologist at West Ham, and we try and talk to the guys and just understand what's going on. But you're right; it's an alpha male environment, and actually, it is difficult if someone says, I'm just not ready, or not. I don't think I can play this weekend, because football is so transient in the fact that if you don't play that game and your replacement, your backup, whatever plays, that could well be you never playing again, because momentum and form is everything. And so there's not really a great way to deal with that. We try and support the guys the best we can, but from a lot of point of views, I think we as football and also all professional sports have just not got this right. But it's also difficult, from a purely financial point of view. If you're paying someone an absolute fortune a week, it's difficult for them to be not available for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 months, So we're definitely opening it up, and we're encouraging our guys to talk more. There's charities set up that we work with, and we also had a guy called Marvin Sordell who came to speak to our players. He retired actually through he was played at the Olympics for Team GB in 2012, and he retired from football, I think age 28 maybe, and he's had quite publicized mental health struggles. He came to talk to our guys and just trying to open that conversation. And I think they gained a lot out of it. So we do try and encourage them to speak, but I can't say that myself or any person in professional sports I don't know has really nailed this 100%. So something that we're trying to keep going with for sure.
Okay, and another subject, when I look at again the typical expats that mobility professionals deal with, they're in their 30s. That sort of is a typical age. Yours obviously are much younger, and some are very young. You said that the youngest you dealt with, I think was 17. But I mean, young players, I mean, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with the duty of care? I mean, if you're dealing with 17, 18-year-olds who are mixing in with grown men and they're boys at that point, I mean, how does the duty of care in all this work? I mean, how do you deal with that?
So we have a great safeguarding team who I work really close with, especially with the under 18s. But we have an academy, and our academy starts at 8 years old, which I think will surprise people who aren't in tune with English football. But we have players signed from 7, 8 years old, and I think looking at that player, so for example, for the 17-year-old we signed, he was a player who was going to go straight into the academy. So because it was an international transfer, my department in the first team got involved, and we found him in a house. His mother has come over with him, enroll him in school, education, and make sure that they can have everything they need. But it goes to more of a pastoral role, as you've said. But we've got to make sure that they can perform as an athlete like anyone else when they come up to the first team with those protections. So we have a safeguarding officer. I'm the safeguarding lead for West Ham's first team. So when they come up, we make sure all our guys have their own rooms anyway, but they have their own rooms. They have, just keep an eye on them. They have separate showering facilities if they would like it. Again, that's sometimes they say, actually, I feel more isolated if I'm, the child who's wheeled away rather than just getting changed in the corner. So There are certain provisions, but actually the issue is that football doesn't see them as a child, and we're away from football. My department isn't in the football side of it. It's trying to say, yeah, they are a child, we need to get them education and look after them and make sure their parents are with them and everything like that. But actually, when they get on the pitch, if they were to play, they're treated the same as everyone else because they're in men's football. So it is really tough. And even like the social media side, you have grown adults speculating about the future of a 16, 17-year-old because they're highly rated and getting on their Instagrams and Twitters and trying to talk to them and all this. And it's a massive safeguarding concern for us. So we have a large team of, I think, 4 safeguarding officers full-time who specialize purely in that to try and look after our guys. But, it's a massive concern, but making sure they've got the right support and, off the pitch, they're treated as an appropriate age, for them, whereas on the pitch, they're treated like any other player.
Okay, and going back to people coming over and transferring into the club, what do you think makes for a successful transfer? And I suppose the other side of the coin is, what are the sort of red flags that make for a failed transfer? Because certainly, we see any number of transfers where hugely highly rated and respected footballers come over to a new club and somehow they fail to perform on the pitch. And I often wonder if that's because something's going wrong off the pitch that we don't know about.
Yeah, I think certainly especially now, like the longer I've been in football, I think that there's not really an excuse to have the operational bits not sorted. So what we try and do is right away is, as soon as that player arrives, get them a house, a car, a bank account, language lessons, schools for the kids, and visas sorted as quickly as we can. And those sort of key 6 things, they kind of help them be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And the quicker we can do that, not only moving them quickly, but into the right accommodation, the right, find the right solution for that is really important. But it depends really on the person and the club. I think you've got to find that right connection. So, one of the things we insist on is the players learn English, and some clubs won't insist on that. And actually, for the players having to do English lessons, which is, with a private tutor in the comfort of their own homes, it's very, very nice. But actually, those that choose not to learn the language, they end up being ostracized because every club in the Premier League has a UK British core of players. And so while there are cliques around, we've got a French clique, we've got a Spanish clique, we've got the British clique. If you can't understand the banter and the conversations and the meetings and everything that goes on, you're not going to be able to fit in. And I think learning that language is really important. And how quickly they learn it as well. I think we have more problems in the UK with regional accents being really strong. So we have a Scouse player and a player from Glasgow, and I know our foreign players really struggle to understand them more than they do another foreign player speaking English as a second language. So
for Geordie.
Yeah, so yeah, a little something to translate it. And to be fair, a lot of the time, actually, I translate English to English. But I'll go on house viewings with a player, and they'll talk about, the estate agent uses all the flowery language to try and get them to go in with property, and they're, these beautiful dual aspect bifold doors, and then the player looks to me, and you're just like, big doors. And that's really the translating English to English, where actually, you're just trying to make them understand at their level. And again, like, we've got linguists in my department. My one of my assistants has got, is trilingual. I've been learning French through lockdown, and so I've had a conversation with our new French speaking player in full of French, and I was very pleased with myself. So, we try and go both ways. We try and meet them halfway and expect them to come in as well and meet us the other half of the way.
Okay. We're pretty much out of time, but one question that came in, I just want to pick up on. Somebody asked, how do I get into player care? How do they get
Yeah, it's fascinating because there's so many different people, in the Premier League. You've got an ex-policeman, an ex-teacher, an ex-player. You've got myself, who's like a business studies, sports management student. In my department, we've got a music graduate and a languages graduate. So there's no real way, the best path. I think the best thing I can recommend to you is you volunteer at your local organizations, try and get that experience. West Ham have set up a really nice family liaison program, which is a great starter. place to start basically working match days with the families, and obviously once the games get open to fans again, we'll start that up again. But yeah, you know, anyone who wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to try and help people. LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. I'm happy to try and help people if I can.
Okay, Hugo, you've been an absolute star. Let me just bring our other panelists back in on. So we've got Julia, Michelle, and someone down there, Pat. So we've got everybody. Hugo, that's been absolutely wonderful, fascinating. I think people have actually loved hearing what you have to say. Very, very interesting. For people out there who want their codes, by the way, we did promise we'd give the codes. So if you want GMS or CRP credits, the code is 16343. And if you want Sherm credits, and again, thank you to Lisa Fontana from Quicken Loans for this, the code is 20-SYCFG, and the HRCI credits are pending. So that's pretty much all we've got time for today. It's been a blast having you on the show, Hugo. It's absolutely fascinating. It's such a different world from the world that we're in. And thank you. A particular shout out to Jack Wilshire for joining us. Having you on the show, Jack. One day we'll get you on the show properly. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody in LinkedIn world who's been listening. And again, we're back this time next week. And don't forget, there's Benevo Bites tomorrow at the same time. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.